Hello, 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 and welcome to the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissel, and joining me, as always, Garrett Zallen. How's it going, man?
Ben, after 2 long months, it appears that your camera has finally been set up. We had to replace a mistaken one. Everyone can look at how handsome he is. And it kind of makes up for a terrible weekend of football for me between Virginia Tech and the Steelers.
The
Yeah, it
Virginia
was
Tech one has to be one of the most brutal losses that I can remember. And I'm with you. The Eagles got absolutely just crushed
yeah,
today. So,
not great.
but that Virginia Tech one, I did think of you when I was watching that.
I'm glad you think of me when you see trauma. So that's so great. Although speaking of good news, we do have a few new ratings and reviews. I think we got 1+1 on Apple. Did we get any on Spotify? I can't
I do
remember.
not think so, no. But
No,
we did get one on Apple. We're at 96 now. We're inching towards that 100
right
mark.
there.
Just one after another. We're getting there. So yeah, make sure you guys leave a rating and review on Apple, Spotify, subscribe on YouTube. But let's just get right into it. Today we got a loaded show. We had a ton of big meets going on this past weekend. This is I feel like the first real result heavy episode that we're going to get. Obviously, last week Garrett got through a nice solo pod going through Roy Griak and some other results. But now we got Nuttycombe, and now we got a bunch of other stuff of other good results to get into. But before we get to that, the never-ending saga that is the Pac-12 rolls on. And to kind of just set the stage here, they have added Utah State deciding to join the Pac-12 in 2026, but they struck out on several other teams, which when we last talked about this, I think we had the exact conversation of why would some of these teams join the Pac-12? And Memphis, Tulane, and South Florida all came to that same conclusion, declining invitations. Elsewhere in the Mountain West, kind of hanging by a thread now, needing to bring in someone else, or they can vote, the schools can vote to dissolve the entire conference. I was behind on this, but I was catching up on all the news here. This is wild. The fact that the Pac-12, who was down to 2 members, could cause another conference to dissolve. It's so strange to me that this is the place we're in, where the Pac-12 is basically Mountain West. It's a set of circumstances.
Yeah, so what you're referencing in terms of the Pac-12 or the Mountain West dissolving was the Pac-12 was gunning for UNLV, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and they were gunning for Air Force, right? UNLV had recommitted to the Mountain West via an agreement, and Utah State was therefore going to agree if they had signed. But in a weird role reversal, Utah State jumped out, leaving the Mountain West short of one signature upon the re-agreement deal to stay as a solidified conference, right? So what happened then is that it then became a dangling situation of UNLV and Air Force. What would happen to those 2 schools if they didn't resign? Well, if they decided to go to the Pac-12 or the AAC, that left just 2 schools, 5 teams remaining, and they would need only 2 more votes to dissolve the Mountain West Conference. If you dissolve the Mountain West Conference, then, depending on some legal technicalities that I'm not aware of, they could have gotten out of those exit fees, which would have been massive. That, however, does not appear to be the case. UNLV and Air Force, from the last that I saw via reporting of Brett McMurphy, Yahoo Sports, they did re-sign with the Mountain West. I believe the Mountain West is looking for 1 more member in order to maintain their FBS status. I saw reports that they could be going after Toledo or Northern Illinois. But now it gets interesting for the Pac-12, because if you're the Pac-12, you need 1 more school to reach FBS status. And, well, you likely aren't getting any more from the Mountain West based on the recent occurrences. The AAC seems pretty set in terms of keeping everyone together. And I don't really know who else you kind of go after that. Gonzaga doesn't have a football team, right? And so they'd be coming on as a basketball-only University. There's been rumors that they've signed and then not signed. It's all a little bit back and forth. And then I've heard light conversations that UConn is in conversations with the Pac-12. That would be a hilarious match for the future.
Makes no sense. Like a Northeast school joining the Pac-12 on its face is crazy, but also just from like a type of university fit, it doesn't really make, and like what they specialize in, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
So yeah, that's where I'm now struggling to figure out, well, where does the Pac-12 go next? Who did they even grab? Is it? I've heard Texas State maybe is in the conversation. Could that be happening? Is it like the WAC? Like, where do they even go? Does the WAC even have football? Like,
I don't know. I really don't know what they do. I mean, I like the idea, and I think I pitched the idea of dipping into the FCS ranks, but that I feel like only makes sense if you're getting a couple of those schools. Like if you can get like North Dakota State and South Dakota State, or North Dakota and North Dakota, like so you keep some of those schools together and those rivalries alive. I don't think it makes sense for just one of them to jump. It's not a good situation. I honestly think the AAC comes out of this like the biggest winner, where they look and seem like they're the fifth biggest conference now.
Yep.
The fact that teams or schools are wanting to stay there, I think tells you what they think about the future of this conference compared to the Pac-12, Mountain West, whatever their conferences are.
Yeah, and for those who are listening, we recorded this on Sunday, September 29th. So there could be developments in the coming days where maybe something happens, a school gets signed, Mountain West lands whoever, or Pac-12 lands whoever. So hard to know, hard to say. But yeah, well, we'll have to continue monitoring that because I have no idea who's going next.
And just a quick cross-country part of all this, Utah State joining the Pac-12, an interesting school to add to the mix to this conference, a team that has been competitive on both the men and women's sides nationally in recent history, not in their strongest period currently, but always a very strong, consistent program generally. And I think we'll just add a nice flavor to that conference moving forward in cross country.
I would agree. I think it's actually, like, when you kind of think about it, it's a pretty nice cross country conference. Like when you throw in Oregon State, and Washington State has occasionally had its moments every now and then, mainly a couple years back. But you kind of add those two programs alongside, like, I don't even, so like Boise State, like Colorado State, Utah State, and then if you land Gonzaga, well, I don't know if they would be coming over for all sports, which is.
Yeah, Gonzaga makes it really interesting. That when I was seeing that, I thought they'd be a really good fit in basically everything, but obviously they don't have football. Like they would just be they're the kind of school that makes a lot of sense in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, let's move off of that and let's talk about Nuttycombe.
Let's do it. And I told you I had a few quick questions before we started the podcast for you. And it's two questions on both the men and women's side, and they can be yes, no, and we can talk about them afterwards. But I think it'll be a nice kind of segue into the rest of the results. Did your opinion on the overall team title race change? And then secondly, did your overall opinion on the individual title race change? And this is on men and women's side. We can start with the men.
Like, did it change what I think the final outcome is going to be? No.
Well, just I guess like what the overall race for that top crowd.
Right. I think BYU was closer to Oklahoma State than maybe we realized. Although, and we'll talk about maybe Cowboys later.
Yeah,
that was pretty wild. I think BYU's a little closer. I don't think they're maybe as close as other people think. And then the individual title for Parker Wolf, I think this is about right. I think he was he was going to win the race. I thought it was a really hard way that he won. Like he overcame a really challenge. But I don't ultimately think it changes how we view him.
And that was my overall takeaway of the on the men's side that I thought was really interesting. That I didn't really see things differently after Nuttycombe for like the title races on the men and women's side. I was just like, this is kind of what I expected. I thought that it would be a dominant performance from BYU, and I thought Parker Wolf would win, and that's exactly what happened. And so I think Parker Wolf still is the primary challenger, but to Graham Blanks, but I don't necessarily think that this changes my mind on he's going to be the favorite now. And then, yeah, on the team side, I think BYU did everything you could pretty much ask for, but Oklahoma State still looks like Oklahoma State. And we can get into that more. Okay, so on the women's side, same questions.
So on the women's side, Sadie Sixstead won the title in convincing fashion. Really impressive win, like super impressive win. If you look at the rest of the field, though, there's not a Caitlin Toohey, Parker Volby, Hilda Olamwamwe, Doris Lemagol, even a Taylor Rowe, Bilachip Curie type runner. They're just not in that field. Like, if you look at all of the women who she beat, don't get me wrong, these are some outstanding names, but there wasn't a top 10 talent from our rank, except Amina Matug, maybe. But it's not like this was like the craziest top heavy field of the
Right.
Of that we've ever seen from Nuttycombe.
Yeah.
So impressive, yes. Do I think she could be a top half All-American? Absolutely. Maybe even top 10. Dare I say that? It's where things get a little fuzzy, but it didn't really change my opinion of what she can do. And then secondly, it's kind of the same deal with Washington and Utah and Georgetown, whereas I still see them as top 10 teams. I still think they can actually all get better and improve from here.
Yep.
But there was no BYU, NC State, NAU, who's even the fourth team in our rankings nowadays? Notre Dame. So I do think Washington and even Georgetown, for reasons that we can get into later, I do think that they're like podium threats and like maybe even bigger podium threats than we initially gave them credit for. But again, I don't think it ultimately changes my opinion.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was trying to get at with that question of it's unusual for Nuttycombe for a Nuttycombe race to happen and us not really change our priors on any of those like big title races, which I think is just very interesting, and I think leads me to believe that there could be a lot more uncertainty going into the national meet, because this is usually where we see a lot of individual and team title previews, and just really didn't even get a whole glimpse of that. I think from a women's perspective, I think what you saw from a team side is, hey, there could be some teams that raced here that are challenging more for the podium than maybe we thought, and maybe have more. They have deeper teams and maybe more firepower than we thought. But none of these teams look like they're really going to be threatening for any team title, which is just, again, it's so weird to say that about a Nuttycombe race. And I guess that's was one of my overall takeaways from just these performances is nothing really like stood out. And when you're talking about the top.
Well, I will say this. I don't think Washington is completely out of the title conversation. I think they have a very slim, like 5% chance right now. I'd give them. That said, I think like this isn't surprising because I don't know, pat ourselves on the back here. We're good at what we do. Like, yes. This is a line. This is exactly like what I said. Do you know who my 3 sleeper teams were for this meet? Yeah. They were Wisconsin, Penn State, and UNC, all of whom cracked the top 10. And I said, hey guys, and you said this, actually, this was said by multiple TSR writers. Hey, we don't know what the status of Oregon is. Are they crazy talented? Yes, they are. We don't know who's going to run this season, who's not. Now, is it unfair to look at Oregon's 9th place finish and then say, well, this is a direct correlation to how good they are? No, it's not, because they didn't run Elmore, they didn't run Ayildez, they didn't run Frias. Who knows? Maybe those women come back later in the season. So unfair to gauge them now. But I was like, I'm not picking them to win. I don't know anything about them yet. And then I look at Georgetown. Georgetown was insultingly low in other rankings. We had them at 6, and Chloe Scrimger didn't run. They got 3rd to 2 other podium threats. So, look, I just gotta pat myself on the back, pat ourselves on the back.
I mean, I don't really look at rankings in other places until I did a little bit at the conclusion of the meet. And I'm like, wait, they're ranked what? And they were ranked what? I was like, no wonder you guys are surprised. I was like,
Yeah.
this is just like, again, we don't need to pat ourselves on the back too hard here, but it
No, we
is,
do.
it is,
We do,
it is,
Ben. Okay.
it really
We
is
do.
stunning that the level of inconsistency that there is in coverage overall. All right, so I wanted to kind of touch on that, and just that when we're talking about this, and Nuttycombe's always a huge meet, there's huge implications across the board. We're going to get into all that. It's just interesting to think about it from a national perspective, that we still have a lot of unanswered questions about who's going to be sitting at the top of the podium on the men and women's side and the individual and team titles. But with that said, where do we want to start, men or women?
Let's start women. I feel like there's a little bit more to talk about on the women's side. So let's start women.
Sure.
You
And
want
again,
to
this was kind of an overall takeaway for me on both the men and women's side, but especially the women's side. You go like 7 teams down, and every single one of those teams, I think, is pretty happy with their performance, which
Agreed.
is rare. Like
Mhm.
obviously finishing in the top 7 at Nuttycombe is always a good performance, but usually you're looking at one of those teams and being like, man, they should have finished 3rd, and they finished 6th, or they finished they ended up finishing 4th, but they could have won. Like, you look down this list, and I think every team has a lot to be excited about. And we can start with Washington. Didn't I mean, Maeve Styles? I think that's the best place to start. 8th
Mhm.
place performance. If she can be this, and Amina Matug was good, but she was not great. She was 27th. You add a really like a firing Amina Matug, and you have Styles running the way she is. This team has a lot more potency than I think we imagined coming into this season.
Well, yeah, not only that, but Julia David-Smith was 12th, which is just a crazy good performance too. I
Yes.
mean, again, she's someone who had built momentum, and Styles had prior pedigree, and like they all of those women had shown signs of being like good runners, not like top tier low stick kind of runners.
Hmm.
And that's what's huge. Styles has fought off injuries and availability and things of that nature, while Julia David Smith has just been slowly chipping away at her fitness and getting a little bit better and a little bit better. And when Amina Matug is 27th, and you're projected to be your top runner, and not only that, but they didn't run Sophie O'Sullivan and they didn't run Samantha Tran. Like, it is crazy how good this performance was. I mean, Chloe Forrester, where was she? She was
29th.
29th.
Yep.
Some teams in these results would say like that's a low stick for us.
Yep.
India Weir 34th. I mean, it was across the board a fantastic collective team performance, balance, no gaps, good depth, and room for improvement. And it was just one of the best results that I think you could have possibly asked for out of Washington.
Yeah, and I think that's the scary thing, is this could be one of their like lower end performances. When you think of all the ways, obviously some people maybe exceeded performances, and at the top that's Styles and David Smith. But you look at Matug and Forrester, you could expect improvement from them. You throw in Sophie O'Sullivan and Tran, and all of a sudden it looks like a 7 deep team that you can almost interchange almost everybody like in that group, where it's like a lot of these women have potential of being all Americans, of being good front runners. And if they can all put it together on the same day, I think you were right at the top, where there is a percentage chance that it all comes together and they end up winning the national meet. It's not very likely. They got to have like everything click into place, but you're seeing the pieces. And I think before the season, I said Sophie O'Sullivan was like the runner that kind of unlocked this lineup. If she can come in with all the talent that she has, we've seen it on the track over and over again. If she can like put in a great performance at the national meet, I think that's where this team does seriously have a shot at contending.
I'm going to move us off of Washington. I want to talk about Utah, Georgetown. Utah's Aaron Ringer got 6th place. which is, again, another breakout monster performance. She had been good in the 1500 meters, like solid talent. Not one of the top low stakes in cross country you could imagine.
No.
Michaeli Caesar, good run in 21st place. Katarina Nowaskawa, sure, yeah, 25th place. You go down, Morgan Jensen, 33rd place. And then I do think there's a little bit of, Anastasia Peters back in 54th. Peters
Yeah.
could have probably been in the top 20, top 25 of this race. I mean, this is another really, really strong result. I think Jensen can be better. I think Caesar can be a little bit better. I think Peters can definitely be better. I look at that and I think that's crazy. And then I go to Georgetown. The firepower and the depth came through without Scrimger, right? They had Melissa Riggins in 7th, and they had Lucy Jinks in 14th. And you go a little bit further down, and you get the supporting cast of Charlotte Tompkinson, who's a 202, 203, 800-meter runner, who gets 32nd at Nuttycombe. Outstanding run from her. Barrett Justema in 44th, and then Ali Nuriker in 48th. Who was more impressive, Georgetown without Scrimger or Utah just
Just
flat
doing
out?
a very classic Utah
Just,
result.
just doing a classic Utah result. Yeah, result.
Yeah, I think it's Georgetown just because, this was, I said it's a classic Utah result because they just, you don't know how it's going to work out, but they're going to end up being one of the top teams at
Yeah.
every single meet that they show up for. And that's exactly what happened. And their development has to be one of the best in the country. Every year, someone takes a huge step forward. And this year, it seems to be Aaron Vringer. Utah, great performance. But I think what was really impressive about Georgetown, we knew Riggins and Jenks had this type of talent. Obviously, them putting it together and running these performances is great. I'm super excited about Tompkinson, Justema, and Nuriker. Like the fact that you have now 3 options for ostensibly 2 scoring spots when Scrimger comes back. You have 3 different runners that you feel pretty good can give you solid production in that 4th and 5th lineup spot. With their top 3, that's all they really need. They just need like decent contributors. And when you don't have to rely, we've seen this time and time again, when you only can rely on 5 runners, it's just so hard to do well at the national meet because the margin of error is so slim. But when you have that extra cushion, you have a 6th runner, it just makes the world of difference. And I think that's what's really exciting about the Hoyas going forward.
Yeah, I mean, when I really think about it, I think you add Scrimger in, let's say she gets a top 5 finish, right? If you add her in, then Georgetown likely wins this meet. But then people will be saying, "Well, Washington didn't have Sophie O'Sullivan or Samantha Tran." But if you look at the scoring, the margin of improvement that O'Sullivan and Tran could even potentially have given Washington is pretty minimal, whereas Scrimger, it's pretty substantial.
Yes.
And so I actually think a full firing Georgetown squad is actually maybe like a little bit better, and I mean a little bit better than Washington. But of course, that's assuming Scrimger comes back and she's at top form. And I don't know if we know that right now. Great runs by both teams. Providence 4th, Wisconsin 2 points behind them in 2nd. Takeaways from these 2 programs.
Yeah, I liked what we saw from Providence. It was the formula that we expected, the top 3 looking really good. I thought Alex Millard, maybe we could have expected a little bit higher of a finish, but for her first big NCAA race to run and finish 19th, very good. Flockhart and May were great. Mooney, I thought, put together a solid performance. They got to figure out that 5th spot, and that's ultimately going to be where they live or die. So I don't think we learned a ton necessarily from Providence. For Wisconsin, though, this was, and I'll loop in Furman here, who finished 6th.
Mm-hmm.
We were having a lot of discussions preseason about, all right, is Wisconsin or Furman ahead in our rankings? And I think both sides were justified by these performances.
Yes,
funnily enough, it was Wisconsin put together in a way that I just really did not expect. We kind of thought that this could be a top heavy team where you have a couple women really leading the charge, but this was a deep team. Like the way that they packed up and ran super well together, I thought was really exciting. And then for Furman, even without Bethany Graham, the rest of the lineup stepped up. Carly Wilkes ran a fantastic race, finishing ninth. If you again, there's a lot of ifs with Furman. We've said the if Bethany Graham thing so many times, but this is a team that looks like top 10 potential if she's back and firing at her best. And in Wisconsin, they just look like they're going to be they might have one of the highest floors in the country based off of this performance.
What was more surprising? Wisconsin having, was it 5 women within
Top
11
15.
spots?
Yeah.
Within 11 spots of each other collectively.
Yeah.
Or Furman running as well as they did without Graham?
Whew, that's a good question. I think Wisconsin, because I was pretty high on Furman. I thought that they could run really well. I didn't think that they would maybe do this well without Graham, but I could see a world where this kind of happened. I just did not expect this kind of run from Wisconsin. Like this,
Yeah.
if you told me they finished fifth, I would have been like, I could see a roadmap, but this was not that roadmap. And so I think that's why it's just surprising, is a more surprising result because of just the structure of how they did it.
Moving on to North Carolina at 7th place. I kept telling everyone, hey, this is a good team.
Yeah.
I don't know if you believe me. I don't know if any of our listeners believe me, but they're a good team. They're not a podium team anymore, but they're still a good team. Where would you rank them in our next update, which will be not this upcoming weekend, but the next weekend?
Oh, I'm terrible at doing these on the spot ones. So they just finished 7th.
Oh, no,
I think this is a top 15 team. I think somewhere in that 14-ish, 15 range, I think
You
is
think
fair.
they're that high?
I do. I just, so the reason why I and again, I'm probably not thinking of some teams that should maybe be in front of them, but this is why we were higher on them at the beginning of the year. They had so many talented runners that not all of them were maybe going to get back to where their peaks, but enough of them were, and that's what we saw. We saw that with Bryn Brown. We saw that with Fatima Alanis, like with their 10th and 15th place finishes. I think there's a lot more in the tank here, where there's women that have been productive in the NCAA before. Taryn Parks, Sasha Naglia, like both of those women can be better. They've had better performances in the past, and I think they got some women that didn't even race that probably could come in and help as well. I think there's a lot of room to grow with this team.
Fair enough. Yeah, and
where would you have them?
19.
Okay.
20, maybe 1920. I need to see a little bit more, because again, there were still a lot of good teams that weren't in this field.
Are you ranking them over like a Lipscomb, for example? I think
that's a good question.
Those are the kind of decisions that I think where it's like, yeah, do they end up like more top 15 or top 20, right?
I'm going to say no, not yet.
Okay.
Because it's one race. And
yep.
Lipscomb did not have their All-American low stick and Lydia Miller. They did have Kira Carter, who now I believe goes by Kira Smeltz. So FYI to that one.
That's
yeah. So they did have her. She did not run well, but Lipscomb, who we can, I guess, passively talk about, they did not have a great day. It wasn't great. Their top 3 ran relatively well. The back end was not awesome. My bold prediction did not pan out at all. But yeah, it was. I would say not yet. I still want to see a little bit more. I think Lipscomb is too deep and too talented to not be a top 20 team in the country right now.
Yeah, and I agree. I just think I think it is a discussion on them or North Carolina.
Yeah.
Who do you rank ahead of each other? I think that's interesting. Moving just down a couple more teams. Gonzaga 8th, Oregon 9th, Penn State 10th. Penn State validating your bold predictions, your faith in them. I think we haven't talked much individually. Obviously, we talked about Sadie Sigstead in her outstanding win. But where did this come from? Where Florence Caron, like, this was outstanding. 2nd place finish. She leads Penn State with that. And they end up finishing 10th, beating some pretty darn good teams, Virginia, Syracuse, and Villanova.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kept saying, like, hey, they've got some great low sticks. Now, granted, I was not expecting her to finish second. And I was also expecting Sophie Toti to be a little bit higher up. But generally speaking, I mean, this is a fairly complete team.
Mhm.
Like, they're not perfect. I mean, I know they had to drop off significantly at
Yep.
their fifth scorer, but they're four runners. I mean, they had their first four runners in before Oregon, who did not run a full lineup. North Carolina, they had them in before. They weren't far off from having four in before Providence. They were just a couple spots off there. It's a really, really strong lineup. It's not perfect, but this at least now positions them to get a few spot improvements in our team rankings. Maybe not a ton, but a little bit. Um, and it also depends on. I'd also have to go back and check a few of the results, and especially what happens at Joe Piani
Yeah.
and things of that nature. But so yeah, nice race for Penn State. Gonzaga had them as an honorable mention team,
Mhm.
and when I'm doing the preview, I'm like, this is a pretty good team. Man, this is a pretty good team. And they just came through, like I looked at them and I'm like, okay, you have Machu, you have Logan Hofsty, you've got Sadie Tuckwood, you've got Willow Collins, and maybe one other woman who I'm forgetting about. If all of those women run well on the same day, they could be a top 10 team. But you have no margin for error, and the probability that you're going to lean so heavily on Hofsty, who is a true freshman, it's asking a lot. And a lot they
Yeah.
got. So yeah, it was impressive.
Hofsty was up for the challenge. It's so hard to be this to finish 43rd. It's not crazy, but like to finish like a respectable result in your first Nuttycombe is very impressive to do. And so, yeah, I don't think this is a team that necessarily has a super high ceiling, but I think their median outcome is higher than what we thought coming into the preseason.
Agreed. All right. So quickly highlighting Virginia 11th, Syracuse 12th, Villanova 13th, Boston College 14th, Lipscomb 15th. Quick thoughts on any of that. Virginia did not have Margot Appleton for the women's program.
Yeah. Virginia was interesting. They had a pack, but it was just way too far back.
Yeah.
So and they seem to, I think, fall pretty heavily over the last like 2K or last maybe K or two. So based off of the live splits, so it could be a team where it's, hey, they figure out how to like run their strategy a little bit better. They could just rise from that. And then Villanova, this is one of the top heaviest teams you're ever gonna
Mm-hmm.
see. Six Fed and Vanessa 1 and 11th, and then third is 73rd, and fourth is 111. Like it is going to be interesting to watch them throughout the year because they are getting nothing from that back end, but they are getting a ton from their top two scorers.
Well, they didn't have Emma McGill,
Right?
who was a top 5 finisher at Big East
They're gonna
and
need her.
Mid Atlantic Conference, Mid Atlantic Regionals, excuse me. Yeah, and they're gonna need her. So hopefully she comes back, and if she comes back, like, watch out for
Yeah.
Villanova. That's a scary good team. But all right, let's move off of that. We'll go to men's side. BYU takes home the win, dominant fashion, 44 points, 4 guys in the top 10, 5 in the top 17, and 6 in the top 21.
1-2 in the B race.
1-2 in the B race. Did we already talk enough about this?
Yeah,
Doesn't matter.
it's just good to see a lot of these guys healthy and running well. I think that's the biggest takeaway. You had a few question marks around that. Obviously, Klinger looks like Klinger again. Troutner, this was probably his best cross country race ever.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and Corrigan, I'm excited to. I'm kind of surprised that we're seeing him already
A
after
little
the
bit. Yeah.
Olympics, but I'm I'm excited to see where he ends up because I think this is probably could end up being one of his worst performances all year.
Yeah, it's just wild. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm moving us off of
Yeah.
BYU. No, nothing against them. They're just really, really good and really, really dominant. And I think we already touched on them a little bit. Iowa State second. So Robin Kimoy Berra is apparently the real deal. Guy goes out super aggressively. Eventually fades. It's the classic, international guy who's just crazy talented, but still needs to learn a little bit about NCAA racing and refinement and the proper usage of someone's fitness. But he still grabs fifth place,
Mhm.
so it turns out he's going to be a stud for as a low stick. That's going to help Iowa State a lot. Saeed McKell, he snags 19th place. And then Silas Winters, 22nd. Huge run for him. Could he be a new low stake? Gabel Sipierda, 29th, probably one of his best early season results in a long time. Devin Kipyego in 33rd is a great result. And they did all of this without their new 822 steeplechaser, Joash Ruto, and without their top All-American from last fall, Sanel Masando. We had them ranked at 5th. Are you saying are you ready to say that they're a podium lock yet?
Ooh, podium lock. I'm not ready to say that. I'm pulling up our ranking list again.
How about this? Let me rephrase that. If Masando comes back in top form, and if Ruto's just even as good as we think he can be, are they a podium lock?
So if you're saying they're a podium lock, you're saying that they're absolutely beating one of these 4 teams. Okay. Oklahoma State, BYU, Arkansas, and Northern Arizona. I mean, maybe over Arkansas. I don't love saying lock. I feel very good about our preseason ranking though. Like I think we were probably high on them, and that was justified. Like I think that they're going to be they're clearly in the mix for probably that 3rd spot. But I just think it's going to be super competitive among those top 5 teams. I think the biggest story for them is Winters and Kipyego. I think Winters, this is the best race that he's ever had, finishing 22nd. The fact that they just have depth now, it seems like, and they're like hitting the ground running, which they just have not done in years, it seems like. And that's if they can still peak the way that they normally do, then maybe they are a lock. If because they're always so much better in the postseason than they are in the regular season. If that continues to be the trend, then they could win. Like it's amazing how much they've improved in previous
years. Yeah, that's true.
Would you say they're a lock?
Though I was potentially leaning there until you made that argument. The 4 teams, and I was like, that's a good point. I kind of forgot that those 4 teams were our 4 teams in the preseason. I was like, yeah, that's logic. Crazy how that works. So impressive run by Iowa State. Kipyego and Winters are truly the guys that are biggest heroes there. Moving on, Wake Forest. Validated. We're validated.
We're victory laughing all podcasts.
Oh, this is great. We're leaning into it. Your guy, this is your guy specifically. Rocky Hansen gets 2nd overall just when you thought he couldn't get any better. He does. 2nd place. He'll be a future national title winner one day. Yep. But the biggest development of all is Luke Tewalt back in top tier form, arguably just as good as his All-American run from 2 years ago. 10th place, huge low stick result, completely changes the complexion of how we view Wake Forest. They had a really nice run overall with Charlie Sprott in 31st place. Aiden Ross, great breakout race in 36th place. And then where else am I seeing a Wake Forest runner finish? I think it goes back a little
71st,
bit.
Daniel Winter.
71st, thank you. Daniel Winter. But they did this all without Joseph O'Brien, their 2nd scorer from last year, who will probably be the 3rd or 4th guy this year. 3rd place, 150 points. They were a little bit further back from Iowa State, but they were somewhat comfortably ahead of North Carolina. Love this result.
I love that I'm going to be the Rocky Hansen guy. I hitched my wagon to a guy at the freshman year. Like now I got to be the Rocky Hansen for like 4 years. I could not be more thrilled. But you look at the results and the class distinctions are always like fuzzy. You don't know how real they are or anything. But it is sophomore, senior, sophomore. Like, this is why we are high on this team. They're doing this with so many underclassmen. You add O'Brien in there. Obviously, Tewalt's going to be gone, I think after this year. But it's just going to be a rock-solid team this year, and with just so much upside. Like, the Sprott and Ross performances just make me so excited because it seems like those guys are are leveling up, and if that like they just need continual improvement from any of this sophomore class, and it seems like they're just getting it year in and year out. I don't know. I could probably gush about this team for a long time, so I'm just gonna stop it.
All right. Well, in an effort for us not to overly gush about our preseason number 11 pick, we're going to move to North Carolina. Our preseason number, did we say 8 or 9 for North Carolina? I think it was 9.
Let me pull that up.
Yes?
9, I think.
9. Yeah, I think they were 9. Great run. Great run. Parker Wolf first, and Ethan Strand seventh. Great runs, unsurprising. The biggest surprise was Colton Sands in
Yep.
24th place. Fellow PA guy. Awesome performance. 24th place is it's like some teams would say that's a great low stick result. And if he's going to provide that, that's just like monumental stuff. I mean, that basically, maybe not entirely, but maybe it replaces Alex Phillip by like 80%,
Yeah.
and that's a pretty substantial result. Now, granted, there is a drop off right down to 72nd place Will Coogan, who, all things considered, actually ran pretty well. And then a few other North Carolina guys at the back end there, Max Murphy, 94th, Patrick Anderson, 92nd. The back end needs to be better, but I think it will be better. And I really like this performance. It was better than I thought it'd be.
Yeah, I think the difference this year with that back end is you're looking at pretty talented guys that you're like that you just try that you believe are going to figure it out throughout the season. Whereas they were relying on guys that hadn't proven hadn't had this level of the same level of track record that like Max Murphy, for example, had at 94th. You can see a pathway for him being a lot closer to Coogan moving forward and solidifying that fifth spot a lot more. So yeah, we kind of expected this with this North Carolina team that would be a little top heavy. Sands it bridges that gap significantly, and that's huge for them. But I don't think a lot of surprises with this North Carolina team.
Washington 5th and Michigan 6th. I'm going to lump them together.
Yes.
Two teams that I was like, I'll gotta be honest. Michigan, I was just not high on them at all. I was like, this is a kind of a boring team. I thought they were a boring team last year, and I thought they were going to be way more boring this year because of Tom Brady being gone and Nick Foster being gone. But that was not the case. Again, just great collective team effort. Washington brings back Nathan Green early. Evan Jenkins doesn't even run that well, and yet they still get 5th place with Tyrone Gores or is it Gorsey or Gores?
Wrong person.
Sure.
Don't know.
And then Leo Dashbach, both cracking just inside the top 30. Strong contingent there. 5 in the top 85, I believe. Great runs, better than expected. Both teams were just miss squads. Relative to maybe your initial expectations, who had the better run? I know Washington was like a place above, right? But
yeah, I think it's Michigan. There was not a world where you could have told me that they pulled out this kind of performance, and the way they did it. I mean, 4 in the top 60 is very strong, and having Caleb Jerema finish 20th, I just there's a lot more oomph to this team than we thought, and I think they were decidedly lacking in that in our mind coming into this preseason. Just the fact that they can have that many guys packed up in the top 60, and then you have someone that is like can do a facsimile of a front runner, and Jeremiah, and I think that's huge for Wisconsin or for Washington. I'm just thrilled to see Dashbach like show some of the promise that we saw in high school. 28th isn't lighting the world on fire, but it is a really exciting performance. The fact that they were able to do this well with Evan Jenkins, who we presumed would be one of their top 2 runners, not having a great day, I think it is also really heartening. And for Gorza to come in, didn't really see him much last year to finish 27th and run this well. I think this changes how I think about Washington significantly as well, but Michigan jumps to a whole nother level with this performance.
Who has more upside?
I think it's still Washington.
I think
based
so too,
off of what I was saying with Evan Jenkins, I need to see it another time for Michigan before I kind of believe it. Like they're obviously better than we thought, but this feels like it could be a fluke race, and I just want to see another performance like it.
So, interesting. So, where would you rank them in our next update?
I think like 20th would be fine. I'm not 100% sold there.
Interesting. I don't disagree at 20th. I think that's not terribly. Maybe I'd give them a touch higher, but that's generally about right. Moving on, 7th place, Eastern Kentucky, your team,
Hmm.
by the way, which is ironic because
Yes,
they're your
I
rival
hated
in
them. Yep.
college. Yeah, well now they're your team. Justin Gibkowic, 13th place, and then a bunch of like good results. Not great, but good results. And Thomas Vega in 49th, and Mario Priego in 51st, and who else? Muhammad Jahari in 73rd, and German Vega in 78th. Those Vega brothers, I believe, are from New Mexico JC. Jahari returns. They did this all without Taha Arue, so encouraging if he does come back in top form. Good run.
Yeah,
That's it.
I thought this was, considering who they raced and the fact that they got nothing out of Imroth. I thought this was a pretty strong performance. And again, why I was pretty high on them, I just thought they had enough names. I wasn't sure who was going to show up and be contributors,
Fair.
but you just felt like there was too much talent on this roster for them not to at least be solid. And if Kip Coach proves that he can be this type of low stick, they're gonna have a pretty high floor. And I mean, if El Rue comes in and is like another front runner for them, then this is where it gets interesting to the point where they could be pushing towards that top 10.
What's their ceiling this ball?
I think like 8th or 9th. I think they could get in the top 10.
Interesting. I know it's still not that high, but okay.
I think there's there's a roadmap where they are like right there with North Carolina, and I think North Carolina I think that's, depending on how good you think North Carolina is, I think that might vary your interpretation of that.
Okay. I think like mathematically from like matchup perspective, I don't disagree. But for whatever reason, I just struggled to
Yeah.
get behind this idea that they would be a top 10 team. Colorado 8th, 1 point ahead of 9th place Princeton, 10 points behind Eastern Kentucky. Isaiah Givens in 30th place, and then a bunch of just guys together, like just a few spots back, and Dean Casey 55th, Cole Mattinson 58th, Simon Colati 65th, and Anthony Monti, the graduate transfer from Princeton, in 66th. Is this a good or a bad result from Colorado?
It's weird. It's decidedly different than I think we expected. I think it is a good result to have a pack like that. I think is always a good thing. Now, would you have liked a few people to step out of that and be closer to Givens? Absolutely. But this feels like they're trying to feel each other out and trying to develop a little like just a strategy moving forward. And Carlson's trying to figure out what he has in each of these runners that he hasn't coached before. I think this is a good sign. I think they're going to be better than this moving forward, and I think this gives them a good platform from which they can grow.
I agree. I think they're going to be better than this. I would have liked it to be a touch better, but I thought this was a good step. Princeton rallies back from losing a ton of guys, or at least a ton of crucial guys. Miles Hogan in 26th
Yeah.
place comes out of absolutely nowhere, which was awesome. Jackson Shorten, the steeplechaser, he runs exceptionally well. Weston Brown in 50th. And then you got probably a few other guys who I'm just missing down further down in the results here.
Daniel O'Brien.
But Daniel O'Brien, yes, thank you.
And then Nicholas Benston is like the big name, right?
And that's the thing. This team ran so well, got 9th, with Miles Hogan having a breakout race, Shorten doing very, very well, and they did it with their All-American low stick star having a tough day, which is like unfortunate in that instance, but also extremely encouraging. Yes. Like, I hate to like do that for like these early season results where I'm like, that guy ran really poorly, so that's encouraging, right? Like, I know that's not the case, but I can't help but be like, man, this team has so much upside now.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't even have to be like what he was last year. He just has to be like good. And this is a team that runs 5 deep in very solid, like top 100 S scores. And when you have that many like quality guys, again, you would rather there be a 6 guy, so there's a little bit less of a margin for error. But if they're all hitting like they did this week, they're going to be a lot higher at nationals than anybody could have expected coming into this season.
Speaking of low sticks and firepower,
Mm-hmm.
Villanova in 10th place. Liam Murphy, who looked great, by the way. Awesome run by him. Third place, Marco Langon delivering.
Yes.
Their rookie, Bailey Habler, in 64th. He is the third stabilizing scorer, not Devin Comer. Their final two guys
Yeah.
dropped to 114th and 119th. It's going to be a very top heavy lineup, and there's going to be no margin for error, but it's going to seemingly work out roughly as good as I think we thought it would.
Yeah, very similar to all the analysis we said about their women's side, honestly, except for maybe even more disparity in between their first and fifth runners.
All right, a few rapid fire results here. Virginia 11th, Syracuse 12th, Georgetown 13th, Portland 14th, Florida State 15th. Should note that Virginia did not run
Nathan Mountain.
Nathan Mountain or Will Daly. And yeah, who did you like the most out of that group of five there?
I didn't love what I saw from a lot of these teams. I thought Georgetown was better than I expected. I was heartened to see what they did. Virginia, I'm nervous about. I granted they didn't run those guys, and Will Anthony and Gary Martin ran well, but like I just we need to see someone else like step up a little bit. And I thought that was gonna be Wachtel, and it just didn't happen. I've been pretty high on this team over the last like 15 months, and I'm starting to lose a little faith, which is just they have not put the pieces together yet.
I am kind of on your side, kind of. I don't. I'm biased. I'm a Virginia Tech guy, but like I predicted this team to be second. You know, now I did say, hey, if they run a full lineup, and I do think it makes a difference if they run a full lineup. They wouldn't have gotten second, but I think they would have been a comfortable top 10 team. Would have been seventh, yeah. Would have been much higher than sixth, probably not. No, yeah, they just need more. After Martin and Anthony, it just has to be a little bit more potent. Outside of that top 15, who are you still highest on?
I think Montana State it didn't
Mm,
run Levi Taylor. I think, and this again, this is more a faith in what they've done as a program over the last couple of years. I think they can all be better. A lot of these guys can be better. I think like Manis and Perrin can run a little bit better. And I was fine with what Sam Ells did. I think Will Kelly, if he's their fifth scorer and he finished 104th, I think that's good enough. I do think they just need to have Levi Taylor back in that lineup, and if he's not where he was last year, then they're in trouble. But I think there's a roadmap to them just being fine again.
all right, that's our Nuttycombe analysis. I'm going to cut it there, but I am going to give you rapid
Let's
fire
go.
results here. We got Gans Creek Classic, we got Cowboy Jamboree, and got Chili Pepper Festival. I'm going to list off a handful of results that I found interesting. You let me
Sure.
know. Just give me one or two sentences of quick reactions.
I will do my
All right?
best. Yes.
Yeah, try to count them. We'll see. Stanford men win the Gans Creek Classic with 31 points. Drop off is significant to Tennessee second, Auburn third. You have Leo Young second, Cole Sprout third, Lex Young fifth, Thomas Boyd in eighth, and then Paul Bergeron in 13th. Thoughts?
Look, not a deep field, but if Sprout is back to where we think he can be, and the Youngs are running next to him, really good sign for them moving forward.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I like that take. Stanford women win the Gans Creek Classic with 44 points to defeat Tennessee, who was a runner-up at 92 points. Tennessee did run Ashley Jones. They ran Rachel Sutliff. They ran Jillian Candelino. They ran JC Sievers. They ran what appears to be a mostly stacked, and not maybe entirely, but mostly stacked lineup.
Sophia Dudek, is she back? Like I think that
Second place.
There's a lot of firepower in this lineup that did not run, and if she's good, this team is very, very interesting.
I should also note Florida was fourth in this race, but they did not run Hilda Olamonwe. And had she run, they cut off like 80 points and they get like a comfortable second place.
Wait, no, they do not
So-
cut off 80 points.
Florida? They cut off 89.
Oh, wait,
then.
yeah, you're right. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
That's
you're right. They
insane.
don't cut off 80 points. They cut off
That's
89,
wild.
actually.
Oh wow. Yeah, they win.
But
They're very close to winning.
Yeah, I don't know if they win, but they get very close to winning, which is a very interesting result. Okay, moving on. Chili Pepperexy Festival. Texas women win with 42 points. Nice run. They had 3 women in the top 6. Nice runs there. LSU second. Arkansas women, despite going 1-2, they did not have Sydney Thorvaldsen. However, if you add her into the results, I believe they still lose to Texas. Thoughts?
Not great. I think we've both been kind of uncomfortable with the direction the Arkansas women have been going in the last couple of years, and it seems like they've been able to paper over the cracks a little bit over the last year or two, and it seems like those cracks are emerging in a bigger way.
I don't know if I've been necessarily uncomfortable with like how the direction of the program. I think I just keep waiting for the holes to be patched.
Right.
And they're just
not happening.
They're just not.
Yeah.
So I know there was a coaching change there recently and all that. So a little bit difficult. And who knows? When Thorvaldsen returns and in a bigger field, that 1-2-3 punch will probably be better. And I do think Mackenzie Rogers will be better. So I'm not like giving up on Arkansas yet. Not the greatest result, but congrats to Texas.
Yes.
Great run from Texas. Arkansas men dominated. Like it wasn't even close. They ran like half their lineup. Thoughts? Does it matter? Do you care?
Yeah, would have liked to seen Masai a little bit closer to Chesedin. That was kind of my big takeaway. Over 30 seconds behind him. I think they're gonna need to be a little bit more consolidated if they want to be as potent as we think they can.
Yeah, didn't run Kiprop, didn't run Shearer, didn't run O'Donnell.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they got other
guys,
guys, but I think Chesedin and Masai were additions that we were pretty excited about, and maybe they only really need one of them, and Chesedin is that guy. But I would have liked to seen them kind of finish together.
Agreed. Men's Cowboy Jamboree. Brian Massau runs, and I'm not a big time guy at all. I hate times in cross country. Don't ever tell me about times in cross country. But he did run 22:55 on like what is supposed to be a very challenging course.
And
just throwing that out
crushed Tim Samuel.
Yes, if you define crushed by 8 seconds, which I think we are, he soundly defeated Haptum Samuel, who was second. LeBron Kipkemboi third, Oklahoma State. Dennis Kipnagetish fourth, Oklahoma State. Victor Shitsama fifth, Oklahoma State. And Ryan Shoppy sixth, Oklahoma State. Over a New Mexico team that we felt pretty good about their chances of being a podium squad. New Mexico ran a full squad, had one guy DNF, and were destroyed by Oklahoma State. I can't tell if New Mexico like ran well or they ran poorly or Oklahoma State is just that much better.
This I don't smoke, but this makes me feel like I need to go for a smoke break. Like looking at these results. They're so good. I don't know how anybody touches them. This is ridiculous. And the fact that like Kipkemboi is their second, if he's gotten better.
They didn't run Masaudi. They had Guadia unattached in 10th, Jonas Price unattached in 12th. I just imagine the Ben Affleck.
Yes, that's what I was going for.
Just could you imagine? Just you were trying to race this team this year, and you're like, I need a smoke break, and you're just like, oh, these Cowboys! Oh my God,
It's ridiculous.
Oregon third. Nice run by them. They did not run Devin Hard, Evan Dorenkamp, Evan Bishop, but still ran well. Texas fourth. Did not have Roger Rivera, who did run earlier this season, 12th place, and Russ Buster did not see him since. Incarnate Word, by the way, like sneaky good 5th place race. I thought that was random, but cool. Any thoughts?
No, I think Oregon, this was a solid performance. I think
Agreed.
they have a lot to be excited about. I think Beerbaum looking good. I think he wasn't great. I think he was good. I think they really need him to take that next step.
I agree. And Ben, on that note, we've wrapped it.
Awesome. We made it. Hey, and we're like right near the hour mark. Where this is excellently done. So yeah, that wraps it up. A lot of really good results. It feels like the NCAA season has really hit into high gear once again, and we're gonna have a lot to debate and talk about when we're putting together our next rankings. But man, I think you mentioned this after Nuttycombe. Just love this sport. It gives us it gives us all our vitamins, and it gives us everything we want year in, year out. There's so much to dig into that we didn't even talk about today, and excited to continue to talk about it up until November.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Congrats to everyone. Fun weekend, a lot to talk about, and a whole lot more content on the way. If you are a D2 fan, we have some news coming in the next week or so. Watch out for that. That's some pretty fun stuff. So, but Ben, that for now is all I got.
All right, until next week, I'll talk to you.